Wikipedia describes you as an author, philosopher, and a conspiracy theorist.
I don't know what is a conspiracy theorist. Can you kindly explain it to me?
Somebody that has theories about the world and intricately thinks about them. I think the term has a lot of negative connotations, unfortunately so.
I seem to understand anyone who penetrates the truth when they are telling lies, we are this conspiracy business.
Yeah, it's dismissed.
When we tell the truth while you're telling lies, then we are in conspiracy. I have no time for that nonsense.
Yeah. And how much of this journey of knowledge that you've been on, for the longest time, dealing with the really intricate issues of matters of faith and politics and also, I suppose, really complicated things that challenges the way even established theologians see things. How much of that have shaped the way you see the world at the moment? Or maybe I should ask, how does Sheikh Imran Hosein see the world at the moment?
I see the world through truth and not through lies. I see the world through actual reality rather than through appearances, at a time when appearance and reality are not the same. I see the truth through the Word of God, the one God. Whether you accept it or you don't is irrelevant to me. The Qur'an is the Word of God. And if you don't accept it, when you die on Judgment Day, you'll have to face the truth that the Qur'an is indeed the Word of the one God. And the truth the Qur'an says of itself that it is absolute truth. My scholarship is built on truth in the Qur'an.
And that sometimes, is, very sensitive for some at least, difficult to accept, because some would say there are versions of truth, or the truth can sometimes be subjective, which, is a complicated thought nonetheless. However, I want to maybe then understand whether, because there's been variations to this debate, you often were attacked for certain positions that some would say, discourages or moves away from, sort of mainstream scholarly work, etc., even on matters of hadith and so on that you disputed at some stage, not hadith as a principle, but certain types of hadith. And I'm wondering whether you find that the Muslim discourse has matured through the years to be able to accommodate discussions that would hopefully take us further in understanding matters of faith.
I am not a part of such discussions. I never enter into debate. I say, if you're not comfortable with my views, then don't accept them. I don't need your acceptance of my views. No. I follow the prophets of God who walked on the earth. And when they spoke the truth. And if you didn't accept it, they moved on. I'm not in with any boxing gloves to fight with anyone, but if you come at me with a chip on your shoulder, I fight fire with fire.
Yeah.
But those who come to me humbly with thirst for knowledge in their hearts, I'm happy to present the Qur'an to them, absolute truth in the Qur'an. I know that I will always remain a voice crying in the wilderness, especially in a world in which, when COVID came 3 years ago, and the slave master said, stand 3 feet apart, and all the slaves stood up beautifully so, 3 feet apart, instead of resisting the slave master and being faithful to the truth, and saying, if I am not allowed, if the Lord is not allowing me to stand shoulder to shoulder in prayer, I prefer to suspend the congregational prayer rather than to betray the truth. So why do I have to engage in discussions with such people? I don't have time for them. So if that is mainstream discourse, let mainstream discourse go its way and leave me alone.
and I want to deal with a when you get to modern day politics in Syria and how it relates to historical interpretation, I've been grappling with this subject for the longest time over the last couple of weeks. But I want to maybe just talk about something that was seen to be terribly controversial. I always with keen interest wanting to ask you this question for very many years. Ya'juj and Ma'juj, Gog and Magog, that was a highly controversial viewpoint.
There's no controversy in Gog and Magog. It depends on what is your primary source of knowledge.
And what was
my primary source of knowledge is the Qur'an. Their primary source of knowledge is other than the Qur'an. So then, where do we go?
And your argument is that this
the primary source of knowledge for me is the Qur'an. The primary source for others is not the Qur'an. How do we solve that problem? Answer: I go my way and you go your way.
No, fully understand. I understand that. But what I want to understand is, are you saying that period of Ya'juj and Ma'juj is the period? Is it a physical, appearance? What do you understand by the arrival?
What you should ask me is not what I am saying, but ask me what does the Quran say. I'd be happy to tell you what is in the Quran.
Let's go there.
Because these are not my views. This is based on the Quran, and of course it will take some time to explain the subject of Gog and Magog. I have written something like 31 books already. My 32nd book, The Qur'an and Russia's Destiny, is now being printed. And my 33rd book on Dajjal's Footprints in Time, I just spoke last night at Masjid al-Qarar on the system of sacred time in Islam. So I am a writer, and I have a book entitled on Gog and Magog, an Islamic view of Gog and Magog in the modern world. I think that's the title. And when we go to the Quran, we find from the Quran that Gog and Magog are human beings, not some funny creatures living in the interior of the earth. I don't know from which garbage bin that rubbish came from. My language is harsh.
It is.
Yes, but I'm tired of people who have betrayed the truth. If you want knowledge, go first to the Quran. Don't go elsewhere. And when you go to the Quran, you know there are three kinds of beings. There are the angels, there are jinn, and there are human beings. Not funny creatures living inside the earth with 24 ears and 3 noses. No.
Yeah.
Human beings. And human beings don't live in the interior of the earth. Where did that stupidness come from? Human beings live on the surface of the earth.
So how does one determine, or not you, but as you say, Quran is your foundation, that these Ya'juj and Ma'juj are expressed in the form of human beings and that they are already here?
That's a good question. I like good questions. The Quran speaks of Gog and Magog as those who commit fasad. Good. Now then, stay with me. There are only three kinds of beings. There are angels, there are jinn, and there are human beings. The Quran does not speak of anything else other than these three. If it does, then kindly give us the information from the Quran about some other kinds of creatures created by Allah who are creatures capable of committing fasad. Because fasad is a sinful deed. Animals don't commit sin. I don't think even in South Africa animals don't commit sin. Trees and plants don't commit sin. Birds don't commit sin. Only human beings and jinn commit sin, not angels.
Because they've been given choice.
Human beings and jinn have a free will.
Yeah.
And as a consequence can commit sin. And if Ya'juj and Ma'juj commit fasad, then even a schoolboy will know they have to be either human beings or jinn. But we have to eliminate jinn. Why? Because when Zulkarnain built a barrier built of blocks of iron, and he blocked the passage in between the mountains, then the Ya'juj and Ma'juj could neither penetrate nor could not scale that barrier. They were contained. But you can't contain jinn with a barrier or a wall. They will pass through the wall. And therefore even a schoolboy will come to the conclusion that Ya'juj and Ma'juj are not angels. Ya'juj and Ma'juj are not jinn. Ya'juj and Ma'juj are human beings. But this elementary analysis is beyond their capacity to comprehend. So what can I do with these critics?
And I think personally for me, if that foundation, stands, would you then say they are two individual persons, or would you say they represent two types of people in which, you talk about forces of good and Quran talks about forces of good and forces of evil?
No, they're not good. There is no evidence at all in the Quran, the basis of which you can say people who commit fasad can possibly be good.
Sure, but what I'm asking is it a type of people, or are we talking about a specific person? Because in different streams of faith, there is this waiting for a Messiah, and what that Messiah will look like, etc. Is it one particular individual that we're talking about?
There is nothing at all in the Quran which even remotely suggests that God can be one person or Magog can be one person. Rather, they have to be perhaps a group of people, a tribe. And they are a tribe of people who all commit fasad and who all live the same way. However, when we expect to find one set of footprints, we find two. Strangely so, mysteriously so. And we ask, why has the divine wisdom done this? Answer, the divine wisdom has given us a means through which, by looking at their footprints, you can recognize these have to be Gog and Magog committing fasad. Fasad is corruption which can destroy. And Allah has reserved the greatest punishment of all for fasad. Okay? So people who are wicked in their conduct, and South Africa, more than most countries, is intimately aware of Gog and Magog, because they suffered from the oppression of Gog and Magog for 300 years in this country. Yes, 300 years. If the scholars of Islam in South Africa are not as yet capable of recognizing that the oppression which lasted in this land for 300 years was oppression from Gog and Magog, don't blame me for that.
Can I think of Zionism in its current form as a Magog and Magog? This entire concept of spreading corruption in the earth, the way in which it happens. Is Zionism Gog and America Magog?
Good question. When we go to the Quran to identify Gog and Magog, we find that Allah destroyed a town. The Quran does not identify the town. And then after Allah destroyed the town, He expelled the people of the town, and then He banned their return, that they could never return to reclaim this town as their own. Until when? Until Gog and Magog are released, and when they are released, then something will happen only once in history. Let me repeat that. Something will happen only once in history. And that is Gog and Magog will spread out all over the earth. And Allah created them with a power such that none but he can destroy them. Saddam Hussein could not destroy them. Gaddafi could not destroy them. Nelson Mandela could not destroy them. No one could destroy them except Allah. And when they spread out all over the world with their indestructible power, they take control of power in the world. And as I said to you, and I'm saying it for the third time, this will happen only once in history. And when they take control of power all around the world, they will bring these people back to that town to reclaim it as their own. How do we identify Gog and Magog? And how do we identify the town? This is not sophisticated analysis. This is elementary thinking. But yet, I have been a lonely voice crying in the wilderness on Gog and Magog all my life. And it seems that I leave the world like this, as a lonely voice crying in the wilderness, because no matter how simply I speak, they won't accept it. So what do? What is the town? Which is the town? And who are those who brought them to the town? The answer is to be found in a prophecy of Prophet Muhammad, alayhi salatu wasalam, connected to Gog and Magog. He said that Gog and Magog will be destroyed by Allah in Jerusalem.
And you've written quite extensively about that.
He said that Gog and Magog will be destroyed by Allah in Jerusalem. The word Jerusalem is not to be found in the Qur'an and the Hadith because it's in Arabic. And the Arabic language does not have Jerusalem. The Arabic language has Bayt al-Maqdis or Al-Quds. But some people don't know that. So leave them in their ignorance. I'm tired of them, really. I'm tired of them. I don't know why do I have to devote time, precious time, in answering people who have no capacity to think. I'm wasting my time. So if the town is Jerusalem, the people would be the Jews. And then it was the Jews who were expelled from Jerusalem, and then Allah placed a ban on them. They could never return to Jerusalem for 2,000 years. And then came a modern Western civilization, of which the Dutch were a particularly nasty part. I don't know what they are today, but at that time they were a nasty part. Britain was sophisticated in its nastiness, but the Dutch were brutal in their nastiness. And that's why Indonesia today is still Indonesia, while Malaysia is half British and half Malay, not Indonesia, because the British came to Malaysia and the Dutch went to Indonesia. Yes. So when modern Western civilization took control of power in the world, and this happened only once in history, and it is not going to come back. Trump cannot bring it back. No. Western civilization took control of the power in the world, and then they brought the Jews back to Jerusalem to reclaim it as their own, as a consequence of which Gog and Magog are located in modern Western civilization. They are those who control power in the modern West. My critics can shout from the mountaintops, the Table Mountains, as much as they want. This is the truth. And the truth will prevail.
And of course, they can extend to a whole host of other issues, such as the fiat system, the money system, the corruption that you speak of in different forms and shapes that does exist. And Allah, of course, commanding us to resist and fight that corruption where it may well be. I want to then, almost in hindsight, and ask this with a heavy heart, actually. Is October the 7th? Of course, the occupation did not start then. The threats did not start then. The history does not start on October the 7th. But is what has been the genocide in Gaza, is that fulfilling what is a scripture that's been predestined beyond our understanding?
Our prophet, Allah's blessing be upon him, prophesied that in the end time there will be great liars and therefore great deception. So beware. People who can't see beyond their nose cannot recognize deception and would be deceived. And unfortunately, that's the majority of us today. Israel is advancing with her agenda successfully, while we are asleep, looking, not being able to look beyond our noses, okay? I admire those who resist Israel, the Islamic resistance, they call themselves Hamas. I admire the Mujahideen in Afghanistan who fought the Americans for 20 years until Uncle Sam had to put his tail between his leg and exit Afghanistan in defeat. I admire these people. They know how to fight, but unfortunately they don't know how to think properly. So what happened in Gaza is that Israel, which has a PhD in deception, wanted in 9/11 to justify what Israel is now doing before the world. Okay? They did it once before with something called the Holocaust. And the Holocaust made it possible for them to proceed to advance their mission in the world. They did it with 9/11, and now they've done it with October 7. What happened in October 7 has to be understood through connecting the dots, because whoever has the evidence will be killed. That's right. So don't ask me where is the evidence. When you don't know how to connect the dots, go back to school. So all the weapons and all the massive amount of sophisticated art of the state weapons and drones and so on, which were being shipped to Ukraine, provided an opportunity. And what the CIA and the Israeli Mossad did was to siphon off some of those weapons and drones and use their client state of Saudi Arabia to be able to funnel the weapons and the drones into Gaza. And Hamas, which unfortunately did not have much capacity to penetrate the deception, they believed that these weapons were coming from Allah. They believed that these weapons were coming from Allah because the Saudis are our friends, our brothers. Whereas the government of Israel, not all the members of the government, the prime minister in particular, he knew what was happening. And then the Israeli government was warned that the attack was coming. Egypt warned them. Members of the Israeli armed forces warned them. They ignored the warnings because they wanted the attack to take place. The Israeli government is complicit in the deaths of more than 1,000 Israeli citizens when the attack took place, and so many hostages were taken. Israeli government could have prevented it if they wanted to. They didn't want to prevent it. When the attack took place, then Israel got the opportunity to launch the attacks that they wanted to launch, long planned, but could not launch because of public opinion around the world. What I did not know was that a part of the plan was also Syria. And when Trump was elected as president, because they did not trust Trump, and because Trump was on record, and he cannot avoid now, he's on record that he wants the war in Ukraine to end. And he said, I can do it on day one in 24 hours.
Yeah.
So the whole world is now expecting when the United States gets Trump as president, that the war in Ukraine is over, by the shouting. So they had a little time left. A window of opportunity was all they had left to do something to change the discourse. And they were hoping that if they gave their puppy dogs the weapons and the green light to attack Syria, this is the so-called Mujahideen. I don't call them Mujahideen, I call them Israel's puppy dogs. If we give them the go-ahead to attack during the period after Trump won the election and before his inauguration, we have a chance to save Ukraine. That is that we must attack Syria in such a way as to provoke Russia and Iran to enter the war to save Assad. That was the master plan. And if Russia and Iran were to enter the war to save Assad, NATO would enter the war. And that would mean that Ukraine will have a second lease of life. That was the master plan. But Allah blessed Russia with insight. And when Russia realized that this was the master plan, Russia then advised Iran, and both Russia and Iran informed Assad and the Syrian armed forces, we are not going to intervene. And they realized, therefore, there's no sense fighting anymore.
Syria, of course, happened, 2011. By 2013, Hezbollah then enters Syria, and we have successive years of war being fought there. A little bit spills over into Iraq and so on. And we see coming onto the scene are these groupings that are then funded by the Americans, supported by the Israelis, as well as the Turks are playing a significant role there. Turkey, of course, a member of NATO, but also has its own nationalistic interests with the Kurds and so on. You've always maintained that these guys are not freedom fighters. They of course make takfir and they declare people apostates and so on, and they do the most vile things at the time since 2011. More than a decade later, we see things fall in the way that they did and how quickly Syria fell. And there seems to be, again, a point of contention about who the current people in power happens to be in Syria at the moment, Julani and so on. Julani, of course, coming from Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, and before then it was Jabhat al-Nusra, and before then it was ISIS, as it were. He says they reformed. They're calling to be removed from a terror list that of course is being hosted by the United States, and now appear to be setting up this new Syrian modern state that's going to be free of any sort of extremist ideology, as it were. Let's deal with the Syria situation and who's in control at the moment, because being in opposition to that seems to suggest that you're fine with an Assad government who has had, together with his father, had a very negative, let's call it reputation, in the massacres and things that have happened, the Baath massacre and so on. So what is your sense about the complexity that Syria represents and who's in charge at the moment?
I would be a fool to defend an oppressor. I have always condemned oppression. And if Assad was an oppressor, he must be condemned as an oppressor. Okay? I was not aware of what is now being peddled in the public about the prisons in Syria. But let me tell my Syrian, my critics, that every single government around the world today have that kind of baggage. They're committing oppression around the world, in their prisons and so on. All over the world, probably Syria, Saudi Arabia, most of all. But they bark and they bark and they bark about Assad, and they want to accuse me now of being silent when they are silent about all the rest. So what's new? I am not defending an oppressor. Not at all. But if Assad was resisting Israel, and they say no, Assad was not resisting Israel because they have nothing in their head but peanuts. If Assad was resisting Israel, then that was the right thing to do. Who have taken over from Assad? Are they resisting Israel, or did they take Israel's weapons and drones and so on to fight the war? When they were being injured in battle, did they not go to Israel and they were being treated in Israeli hospitals? Did Netanyahu not come to visit them? These Israeli puppy dogs who now control Syria were in hospitals in Israel, and Netanyahu went to visit them in the hospitals. So tell me, was it better to be under Assad resisting Israel, or to be now under the control of Israel's puppy dogs? And Syria is no longer in resistance of Israel. Syria is like Saudi Arabia, in a state of servile submission. So don't come at me with all of this nonsense, diverting the subject about Assad's oppression, because I condemn all oppression. Let's do that and stop that discussion and come here, which is a major discussion. And when we come here, we find that now all that remains after Syria is that Iran is in resisting Israel, and Yemen is resisting Israel, and all the rest are in servile submission. This is my analysis from the Qur'an. The Qur'an is teaching me, I don't know who is teaching them. The Qur'an is teaching me that when the Jews and the Christians join together in friendship and alliance, and that is what has happened today in the Zionist movement, and that is what is NATO. And you join NATO and you become a member state of NATO, the Quran says you're no longer a part of this ummah. Tell that to Erdogan, who is not only a member of NATO, but comfortably so, and exploiting Turkish membership in NATO to advance his own agenda. And he pretends to be a leader for the Muslims. Only sheep and cattle will accept Turkish credentials. I reject them.
I mean, Surah Nisa talks about, fighting, Satan's evil forces. And of course, we spoke about Gog and Magog, and there was the reason why I went there to start off with, to understand who happens to be these evil forces, as it were, because on the one end, the history as you've now related to be, the timeline of events, those are the ones that I share very deeply. I mean, I cannot, in the absence of the fact and the reality, understand the chronology of events other than the way you've put it now. However, you have, this seemingly divisions around who to trust to be the ones that are friends of Muslims and are ones that are in the pursuit of justice. So let's look at, the Emirates. Let's look at the Saudis, the Turks that you've mentioned there. Of course, I'm not talking to the people. I'm talking about the leadership. Let's look at Egypt. When Mohammed Morsi was deposed and there was a military installation there, or the military was installed, as the head of Egypt, there's no real been proper credible elections ever since. Together with a whole host of other countries that I can mention, and when one looks then at the genocide in Gaza since October the 7th, that it was really only just the Ansarullah, or the Houthis in Yemen, Hezbollah, and of course the Iranians that have been in some sort or the other trying to bring support and fight what is the common evil here. And so I want to understand the leadership that we have, and I struggle to call it Muslim leadership, but nonetheless the leadership that is and does exist at the moment. What is your reading about where we are? Because a couple of months ago there was talk about Saudi and Israel normalizing relations more openly than what they already have. So what is Sheikh Imran Hosein's perspective on this dystopian idea of Islamic leadership?
You have brought a number of subjects together in one comment in order to bring clarity and remove any confusion from the minds of the listening audience. I would appreciate it if you could repeat a question.
Okay. The question is, what is Sheikh Imran Hosein's perspective on Islamic leadership? That to a certain extent there is the scholarly leadership, and then there is the leadership that we expect as the custodians of different lands, Arab lands in particular, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Qatar, the other Emirates, and so on, vis-a-vis Iran, Hezbollah, and Yemen, as it were. What do you read about the current situation between those two?
That's a simple question. Jerusalem lies at the very heart of Akhir Zaman. Resistance of the bogus state of Israel and its oppression lies at the very heart of the end time. And those who are on the right path and should be accepted as leaders would be those who are resisting Israeli oppression, not those who are in submission to Israel, particularly those who have recognized Israel as a state, which is an act of shirk, and who are in diplomatic relations with Israel and also in trade relations with Israel, supplying Israel with oil, and acting like Israel's puppy dogs, like Azerbaijan and Turkey. Mm-hmm. They don't qualify for leadership role of an ummah. Rather, it is only Iran. It is only Iran which is showing credibility and honesty and integrity in consistently opposing Israel and resisting Israel. Mm-hmm. But Iran is not is a sectarian state. The Shia is a sectarian movement. And as a consequence of being sectarian, there are many significant weaknesses in Iranian eschatology. When I went to Moscow, maybe, 13, 20 years ago for the first time, I was invited by the State University of Moscow to lecture. And I met with Professor Alexander Dugin for the first time. And I met with Russian eschatologists. And I found that Iran had preceded me for many years. And Iran had already conveyed to them a version of Islamic eschatology which was wrong. Mm. That version of Islamic eschatology told Russia that the most important event, the most important actor in the end time is not Jesus, the Messiah, Nabi Isa alayhi salam. No. He has a secondary status. It is the Mahdi. And they don't call Islamic eschatology by that name. They call it Ilm al-Mahdawiyah. The study of the Mahdi is the eschatology. Okay? And the Iranian eschatology, because it has some defects, I spent 4 hours in Qom, which is the intellectual center of Iranian Shiaism. And I was in the company of 40 Iranian scholars, all of them experts in eschatology. And we spent 4 hours, and I found to my surprise that the same pathetic ignorance that we have in the Sunni world on Gog and Magog and on Dajjal It's the same thing with the Shia, no difference.
Yeah.
No difference. I had to then re-educate the Russians. And gratefully, the Russians chose to believe in me now than Iran. In February of this year, Russia organized a very, very important conference. 350 people hand-picked by Russia from 130 countries. And I was the only Islamic scholar invited to that conference. And they gave me a very prominent place in that conference, validating my Islamic eschatology. When the conference was over, I was again surprised when I was invited to join a small group, about 15 people, for dinner with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. The minister spent 2 hours with us, and all the talk was on politics and economics and BRICS and so on, until I intervened and said, Minister, can we speak on the Qur'an in Russia? And when I was finished...
Which is the book that you're busy
When I was
completing now.
finished, the minister said, can you write on this subject? I then spent a few months writing the Qur'an and Russia's destiny. What is at the heart of that book is Surah Rum of the Qur'an. And Rum is mentioned in that surah. And Rum was helped by Allah to defeat the enemy, even though Rum was already accepting the Trinity, even though Rum was already worshipping Jesus as a second person in the Trinity and as the Son of God. Even though that was there, Allah still helped them, and they were victorious. And when they were victorious, the Prophet and the Muslims celebrated their victory. But the Qur'an spoke about 2 victories of Rum, Mim Qabl wa Mim Ba'd. And the second victory has not as yet taken place. I asked Alexander Dugin to write the foreword to the book. And he wrote a beautiful foreword. The book is now being printed. And the most important thing he said is that you are correct, Imran. The Rome of the Qur'an is Russia. And every Russian believes that. So we can trust when we accept Russia as a friend, and when we make an alliance with Russia, we can understand that we are on the right path because Russia is Rome of the Qur'an.
And so are you saying that invariably, ultimately, that when we understand that concept and looking at, as you say, Dajjal and the coming of Dajjal, that it all comes down to what role Russia is going to play in all of these various battles that are being fought in different parts of the world?
What Russia is already doing is so important. To us, it is easy now to understand and anticipate what comes ahead of us, because Russia has already demonstrated that it has now become the dominant military power in the world. There is nothing else to explain. Why is it that the United States of America, which is supposed to be the dominant military power in the world, and which has been changing governments helter-skelter all over South and Central America for 200 years now, overthrowing governments whenever they wanted. And now they've reached a standstill. They can bark as much as they want, shout as much as they want, impose 100,000 economic sanctions, but they can't change the government of Venezuela. They've tried every single thing. They could not do it. Why? Answer, because of Russia. That's why. Because Russia has underwritten Venezuela's security. A war on Venezuela will be a war on Russia. That is evidence that, that Russia today is the dominant military power in the world. Russia could have intervened with Iran to save Assad, But the price Russia would have paid for that intervention is to deny them victory in Ukraine. And Russia said, no, we're not going to allow this to happen. We prefer to sacrifice Assad. That doesn't matter. But the war in Ukraine has to proceed until victory.
Why do you think it's taking so long?
Russia has wisely chosen to fight that war incrementally rather than with a rash display of nuclear power and riding roughshod over Ukraine in one of few. Russia had the weapons to destroy Ukraine in 1 hour. In 1 hour you could destroy Ukraine. The United States, Putin has said we can destroy the whole of the United States in half an hour. Half an hour, that's what he said. We only need half an hour. They can destroy Britain in probably 10 minutes.
Yeah.
All right? Why have they not done that with Ukraine? Because they are acting wisely rather than stupidly. And they're acting incrementally, slowly. And this is causing agony and frustration in the West.
Yeah.
Because they're seeing a war taking place before the whole world. And they, for the first time, cannot win the war.
The end times, right? What is defined as the end times? Is this the period that we're living in right now? And what role do you believe Russia plays in that?
What is the role of Russia in the end time? It's connected with Gog and Magog. The Gog and Magog in Surah Al-Kahf of the Qur'an were contained behind a barrier built of blocks of iron and coated with copper, molten copper. But who contained them? Answer, someone who was given the title. That's not his name. His name is not Zulkarnain. Zulkarnain is his title by which he is known. What does Zulkarnain mean and what does it signify? Zulkarnain is someone who possesses two currents. Two currents. What is a current? A current can either mean a horn or it can mean an epoch, a generation, a time. When we use the Qur'an to determine what is a qarn, we find that the Qur'an has never used the word qarn to mean a horn, and has always used the word qarn to mean a generation, an epoch, a people. And so we are on solid foundations when we say Zulkarnain is someone who impacts on history twice. We are on solid foundations when we come to that conclusion. But those who have nothing in their head but peanuts can't even follow us. So if it is something which will impact on history twice, and once has already happened in the Quran, there's a second time coming, when Gog and Magog will again be checkmated and be rendered harmless. And that second time is coming now, because when he went to travel in the direction of the setting of the sun, he came to the Black Sea. People who think can recognize it as the Black Sea. Mufassirin of the Quran can recognize it as the Black Sea, but the sheep and the cattle are hopeless. So when he went to the Black Sea, at that position, you saw Zulkarnain showing his power in resisting the oppressor. That is his profile. So when the second current is to come, listen carefully. Power will once again manifest itself in the region of the Black Sea, power resting on the foundations of it, because that's the profile of Gog and Magog. And that has never happened since the revelation of the Quran till now. In 2014, Russia recovered Crimea. And I celebrated, because now that Russia has recovered Crimea, which was Russian in the first place, Russia now commands the whole of the Black Sea. And so I am confident, in my view, that Russia's role in the end time is to contain and checkmate Gog and Magog for the second time.
Like, I would understand Quran for the Muslims, right? And you of course, you're using Quran as a premise for these sorts of arguments.
If I am wrong in explaining Gog and Magog and Zulkarnain, then will they kindly tell us what is right, put it down in writing so that the whole world can read it and laugh? That's their scholarship. This is mine.
And so, on that note, how does Sheikh Imran Hosein want to be remembered? You know, I'm not writing your obituary. I
don't want to be remembered. I am not important. The world can forget me when I die. Makes no difference to me. What is important to me is what is in the truth in the Quran. That must be remembered, and that must prevail. Imran is not important.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.